Hey everyone, hope you're doing fantastic. We're continuing our overall nerd out session for the book club, doing some deep textual analysis and synthesis of the Federalist Papers. It's been highly enlightening. I think every political scientist should read it. The founders' brilliance shines in the face of us because they did read a lot and struggle to make this land. So if you're going to criticize them but you haven't actually read anything that they wrote, why should anyone believe you? So that's my little moment of why you should read this book. Okay, so, or at least listen to me nerd out on it. Okay, let's begin. Now remember, we were dealing with the essay number 22, continuing the same topics from like essay 18 of why a Confederate system is insufficient, not recommended. He wants a union, right? Alright. It is possible that the people of America will no longer consent to trust their honor, their happiness, their safety, and so on precarious a foundation. So he's saying, like, who can really build off of the safety in a Confederate system? It's insufficient to raise a force, especially if the other Confederate unions don't want to pitch in. The Native Americans had the Iroquois Confederation, and you can see quite clearly how that just didn't work. If they all would have united in one single force and came to one solid agreement, it would have been better, but they were all tribes and confederates, and it was very hard to get them to listen and obey and come under the one command. It's like Genghis Khan was able to do it, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was able to do it. There's a lot of history of getting different groups to come together to fight. Isn't that what the Spartans, they couldn't get Athens to join soon enough, and Xerxes came in and caused some problems. So he gave us lots of examples. He gave us an example of Sweden. So he gave us quite substantial examples of how time and time again, throughout different cultures, a Confederate system fails. It is possible that the people of America will no longer consent and trust. In this review of the Confederation, I have confined myself to the exhibition of its most material defects. He's laid it out. The material defects is quite clear. Passing over those imperfections and its details by which even a considerable part of the power intended to be conferred upon it has been in great measure rendered abortive. Yeah. So it's like abort mission, right? Just abort mission, no Confederate system, right? You should just be like, he's laid it out for us. He's just put the eagle out the cage. It must be by this time evident to all men of reflection. I love that. Men of reflection. Who are either free from erroneous presuppositions. Aha. So, people of reflection, that implies, don't have prepossessions. They wait for it and then they dig through it using reason, logos and such. Not the illusion of assumption. Right? Can divest themselves of them, that is, a system so radically vicious and unsound as to admit not of amendment, but an entire change in its leading features and characteristics. Wow. He let it out. Yeah, definitely. The organization of Congress is itself utterly improper for the exercise of those powers which are necessary to be deposited in the Union. So, the organization of Congress, it's improper, and how it can act its power out, which would actually be needed for the Union to function. This is interesting. A single assembly may be a proper receptacle of those slender, or rather fettered authorities, which have been heretofore delegated to the federal head. Ooh, look at that. How he worded that. Rather, fettered authorities. Fettered, just like chains, so restrained, held back. Regulations. How he worded that. Fettered authorities. Let's fetter our authorities. You get it? Ah, he's so brilliant. That's a good one. But it would be inconsistent with all the principles of good government to entrust it with those additional powers which even the moderate and more rational adversaries of the proposed Constitution admit ought to reside in the United States. Okay, look at that. So even if you're a moderate opponent to what he wants, and even if you're a rational one, he argues, you will feel that the Constitution is going to be in the United States, and the Constitution will be the tool by which you will make sure it's not a Confederate system. This is so great. Yet that plan should not be adopted, and if the necessity of union should be able to withstand the ambitious aims of those men who may indulge magnificent schemes of personal aggrandizement from its dissolution. Oh my goodness. See what he said here? So there will be people who want to destroy the Union because they want to achieve their own sick, megalomaniac fantasies of personal enrichment. So they will dissolve the Union just for the benefit of their own selves. He's saying you have to watch out for that. The Constitution, by implication, is a tool that will hopefully help reduce that. But in a Confederate system, well, a dissolution, as he put it, can happen because a megalomaniac can get the bigger chunk of the Confederation and stamp out the others, and then you're back to having a overly sovereign leader with too much authority and not a republic system, right? The probability would be that we should run into the project of conferring supplementary powers upon Congress, as they are now constituted, and either the machine, from the intrinsic feebleness of its structure, look at that, because remember, insufficiency to preserve the Union, intrinsic feebleness of the structure, you see what he does? He's so great. Will molder in two pieces, in spite of our ill-judged efforts to prop it. Aha! Ill-judged efforts to prop up something that is just feeble. It's intrinsically feeble. So trying to prop it up is a waste of time because it's at the base. It's within the system. You see how he ties it all back? Or by successive augmentations of its force and energy. Look at that. Successive augmentations, so amendments of its where it's going and how much pushes behind it. Look at that. As necessity might prompt. So necessity will determine how much force and energy you put in augmenting it. Okay. Successively. So just never a break in between. Just always adding, always taking away, redirecting. It's time consuming. Very, almost sounds almost overly changing to where it may be difficult to adapt or watch out, see all the consequences and such, because it'll cause mass confusion, as he put it, right? We shall finally accumulate in a single body all the most important prerogatives of sovereignty, and thus entail upon our posterity one of the most execrable forms of government that human infatuation ever contrived. Look at that. So, taking out the most important aspects of what it means to be a sovereign and putting it in a better place. Thus, we should create in reality that very tyranny which the adversaries of the new Constitution either are or affect to be solicitous to avert. So you have to watch out. So you don't want someone in a Confederate system to get out of control. You don't want it at all, he argues. Even in Congress, you have to really be careful what you give them. You have to have some changes, but not overly excessive. So he's laying it on. It has not a little contributed to the infirmities of the existing federal system that it never had at a ratification by the people. And people's like on the capital letters, so he's like, the people. Ratification by the people. You see that? So he's for the Republican government, and he's against the Confederate system, because some people think the Confederate might be more, of the people than a constitution, which sounds like it would be from above, pushed on the below. But he's arguing through your representatives who you sent. You'll go there and they'll argue it out instead of, having all the different judiciaries contradicting each other and having their own different biases and locality laws, which will impede too much the federal level. I bet, though, we know rationally he wants, anybody wants a balance. You don't want the states to not be able to have any freedom, but you also don't want the federal to have all the power, right? So you want to have a balance. Resting on no better foundation than the consent of the several legislatures, it has been exposed to frequent and intricate questions concerning the validity of its powers, and has, in some instances, given birth to the enormous doctrine of a right of legislative repeal. Okay, notice this. Doctrine of the right to have legislative repeal. So, to repeal something, doctrine of it. Ratification by the people. That's very interesting.